Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today on our episode of the Even Better podcast. This is your host, Sinikka Waugh, and I am so delighted to have you join us today. This is part of our ongoing mission here at Your Clear Next Step to help us all have even better work days so that together we can co-create better communities. And I am absolutely ecstatic to have as a guest today my friend Sue Wilson. Sue, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. And I just, I'm excited that our paths crossed so many years ago and you've helped our nonprofit get to our clear next step. So I'm just excited for the morning and to spend some time with you and your listeners.
So great. So for those of you who don't know Sue, if you're in the Indianola community, you absolutely do know Sue. There's no way to have lived here for any length of time and not have met Sue. She is just such an influencer in this community and has just shown up to serve in so many ways and so many capacities. Right now, she is the executive director of the Helping Hand of Warren County. She's an Indianola School Board Member. She's a board member of the CTE-HOPE. She's a former member of the Governor's Advisory Council for Brain Injuries. She's served on the United Way of Central Iowa. She represents Warren County in several task forces. She does engagement. She shows up. She serves. She rolls up her sleeves. She doesn't just talk about what needs to be done. She researches. She understands. She sits and listens, and then rolls up her sleeves and works and does the work that needs to be done. She and I met when she was executive director at Helping Hand. Now she's serving in We Lift, which just has such an amazing mission here in Warren County. And I'll let her share what she's doing there. But I am just so excited to have her share what she is doing here and talk a little bit about today. We're talking about de-escalation, which, as I understand what's going on in our community, the snippet that I heard was that among the trainings and among the needs that are being offered in our community, among the most requested is de-escalation. Like, that's the one that's being asked for more and more and more is de-escalation. And then you stop and you go, whoa, why is de-escalation being asked for? And so here is Sue Wilson sharing her insights and her expertise and spending a few minutes with us on the podcast, talking to us about de-escalation and about why it's so necessary, and then sharing some insights too. So Sue, thank you for joining us and tell us a little bit about your story.
Yes. Well, thank you again for having us. We Lift actually stands for We Learn Independence for Tomorrow, with our mission really to dig at the roots of what our community needs and then work through our residents and work through the resources and then elevate them to self-sufficiency. So in this whole process, we have 3 pillars of success. Our first one kind of revolves around job readiness. So we do resumes, we do interviews, we do mock interviews. We really educate what it takes to have a job, sustain a job. Included in a lot of that is financial literacy. We do a lot of classes for our second pillar is community outreach. We really believe that in order for people to understand our mission, they have to understand the obstacles and the challenges of the people we serve. We have hosted a reentry simulation, which was a month in the life of people reentering our community after prison or jail time, really to educate people. These are the challenges and these are the things we need to start working on. And we recently in February hosted a poverty simulation, same type of mindset. These are the obstacles that we as a community need to help bridge the gap for. We also do mental health in the workplace, which we team up annually with the chamber. And this year, we really honed in on compassionate leadership and what happens when tragedy hits the home or the workplace. Are we ready? And so a lot of that feeds right into one of our biggest community outreaches, our C3 De-Escalation. When We Lift decided to invest in it with myself and become an instructor, it really has been amazing. We started our very first one. We reached out to United Way, and United Way had over 87 people participate in our 6-hour training. And that would be nonprofits. Des Moines Public Schools took part in some of that. Since then, we've done Waugh Area Christian Services, Families Forward, Anawim Housing, Freedom for Youth. We just did one with our summer youth at-risk program. 13 youth now know how to deal with their emotions a little bit different. And so it really is Sinikka, you talked about it being so needed right now. And our world is a chaotic world right now, from our little kiddos all the way up to our elderly. And we're all just trying to wade through it in a situation that's kind of like daily survival. And so what we're finding is, when I was at the Helping Hand, I really like to sit back, watch and observe, and then dig in. And people were coming in just more emotional. And I'm a firm believer that people don't wake up in the morning and just say, I'm going to be rotten and I'm going to be mean to people. No. Nobody wakes up that way. But what happens is they wake up and they start realizing where their brain is, and they instantly get escalated, right? So we talk a lot in de-escalation that this is a chemical reaction, which I'll get into. It's not their character, but too often we categorize people. That person's mean, that person's the hothead, and it's like, wait a minute, we need to start educating people on how to meet people where they are in their journey. And so that's been our biggest outreach, and it's been very, very popular. A lot of the schools, the people we want to target for that are the people that interact every day with families and people and residents. So I make that joke, like in the trainings, is there anyone that does not deal with humans on a daily basis? Right? Because if you don't deal with humans, then you're right, you don't need this training.
You don't need this training.
Right? It's just all of us. And then our third pillar of success is just partnerships. We cannot do what we do every single day without the critical components of the holistic picture of self-sufficiency. So we work very closely with general assistants. We created a community hub here at We Lift 2 Mondays out of the month that really brings a community of resources together. So we're not just telling our client, hey, go find this office. It's a very soft handoff. Let us walk you right there. And then we, as providers, the group, 6 of us, we make it absolutely critical that we talk on a weekly basis. So we can follow up with the families, whether we need to then push it in the conversations in the school district, push it into conversations with an employer we work with. So we have kind of has our feet in a lot of different places, but we understand that life starts with basic income, right? So we got to start with that job, and then we got to figure out anything and everything that is getting in the way of really self-sufficiency in life. So I'm excited to be here. We got a lot to go over, and let's rock and roll.
Let's rock and roll. Let's rock and roll. All right. So our topic today are 5 components of C3 De-Escalation. So C3 is the de-escalation program that you are teaching in this class. And so today we're just going to talk about 5 components of that, and 5 components of C3 De-Escalation. So C3, let's unpack that. What are the C3? What is that?
So the first one is calm, right?
Calm.
Like how do we get our brain back to calm? How do we use our brain and the circuits in it, right? And then how do we connect the dots? How do we see the big picture of how adrenaline hits our brain, and then connect it to how we manage ourselves in the workplace, at our home, in tough relationships? So it really kind of comes through the whole gamut. This training is typically a 6-hour training. A lot of times we do it one day, and the only reason we do it one day, not ideal, but I also understand food pantries can't shut down, for 2 different days for 3 hours a time. Or we do lunch and learns, and we might do 3 2-hour sessions. So it's very interactive. C3 and what you will learn today, it is not crystallized learning. So it is not, here's the process and you follow it and you'll get the end result. It is flexible. So like, I'm going to be telling you, here are some tools. And this tool, Sinikka, might work great with this coworker, but not great with this family member, right? And so it's really flexible learning as to what you can and can't do. So that's kind of the components of C3. And then it really, I can just jump into the number 1.
You bet.
The main thing, so for the listeners out there, we try to explain the brain very simple. You put your hand up and you bring your thumb across the palm, so it goes to the pinky. And when you look at your thumb, we call that the primitive brain. That's where your emotions sit. That's where your anger sits. That's where profanity sits. That's where all that sits. Now, if you curve your fingers on top of the thumb, that's your higher brain. We want our higher brain engaged every single day, okay? And so when we cover it and it's engaged, it's covering our emotions as kind of a protective wall to us, right? And the reason is our higher brain is responsible for understanding consequences. It's responsible for knowing what's right and wrong. It's our rationale way of thinking. And so when we've got our higher brain engaged, we have the opportunity to sit back and say, wait, if I punch the wall right now, that's not going to feel good. And that's not a solution, right? But when adrenaline floods the prefrontal cortex of the brain, it's like it comes in and knocks your fingers off your thumb and your brain goes offline. And so what happens is that leaves the primitive emotion raw and doesn't really have a safety gate. And so that's when we see the flood of emotions. That's when we see the yelling and the screaming. And so that first component is understanding that it's adrenaline. It is a chemical reaction in the body as we start to escalate, right? That creates these behaviors and these emotions. And so it is one that is really a simple concept to understand. This isn't this person just freaking out. In the trainings, we talk a lot about, you know, when somebody is emotional, what are the words we call them, right? And people will yell out to me, drama queen, or they're insane, or they're psycho, or it's like, well, those aren't nice words, right? Like in the workplace, if someone tells me like you're being psycho, stop. I'm probably going to escalate more. I'm not gonna calm down, right? So the term we use is flooding, right? The brain is flooding with adrenaline. So we're flooders, right? And so that verbiage it is a way to respect people and maintain their integrity. And that's really what this big picture is we have to conduct ourselves every day in a way that honors ourselves, honors our family, honors our clients, and honors our workplace, right? And so the more integrity we have, the more we leave work like, yes, I dealt with that situation well today, the least likely we are to probably run into some burnout, right? But if we're going home at night and we're laying in bed going, oh, I should not have said that to that client. I should not have done that. That plays on your mental health. Right. And then we all get a little anxiety because we know there's an apology that needs to happen. And people don't like apologies. People don't like to admit they've done something wrong. So two things happen. They go and they say, hey, I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. I didn't mean to say those things. Or the apology never happens. And we start to get that relationship break. And in the workplace, that between an employer and a supervisor, a coworker, that can start to wedge. And then that better, stronger communities we're looking at building is not happening.
It's not happening. It gets broken down. So I want to pause for a second because as you've explained this brain, this idea of that shape, which I hadn't experienced before. So that just a really, really easy to picture analogy, and the idea of flooding with adrenaline. This is for any one of us who go to work, right? This is not reserved for any particular group of people, any particular job, any particular, like, you don't have to be an elementary school teacher to have adrenaline. You don't have to be, at the top of a high wire pole working the power lines to have adrenaline in your job. You don't have to be on the police force to have adrenaline in your job. You can be dealing with people in any line of work and have adrenaline show up, right? So we should all be listening to this. Is that a fair statement, Sue?
Yes, absolutely. And to be completely transparent, because that's who I am. We had a lot of yelling going on in our household, right? So this actually started in my home. I can't come to work if I'm flooded in the morning before school with my girls, right? Like, it's just setting me up to not treat my clients or my coworkers with the respect they deserve because I'm already offline.
Yep.
Right. So like, you think of as busy moms and dads, and we're just trying to get everybody where they need to be. I'll never forget when I went out to train Waugh Area Christian Services. I've got this room full of amazing people with the hearts you can't even imagine, the free medical clinic and the food pantry. And yet I had to stop 20 minutes in, and I just was like, I have to tell you guys, like, I just need 2 minutes. Like, we had a total flooding incident at home before I came here with my girls, getting them off to school. And like, obviously I haven't recovered because I couldn't get my words where they needed to be. And those are some of the symptoms that we'll talk about through that when you're starting to flood. And so this information, what my feedback is people learn to use it so much more in their home, and then it carries into work. You know, we all have that family member that's hard, right? When I work with my at-risk youth, I often say, like, find that family member that when you're going, instantly you start to flood just by their name. Let's work on them.
Yep, for sure. Or that situation, that extreme heat right now in the summer, or the experience of you hit your head on something and that causes, like, you bang your elbow or you do something that causes that response. Maybe it's not another human, maybe it's a situation. Okay, so different ways that people respond. Let's move to number 2. So first one was explaining the brain. So you've got just a great way to picture that. So let's go to the second one. So different ways people respond. Then what?
Yeah, so now this is so important because we have to know how our family members, our coworkers, our bosses all deal with flooding. So we have the external flooders, and I like to say these are the ones we hear 4 aisles over at Walmart. We hear the external flooders. They're very loud. They're very angry. They could be stomping their feet. They could be moving their hands. Their voice is very elevated. They could have pounding in their chest. They could have heavy breathing. They could be profusely sweating. Those are our external flooders. We can hear them, right? And then we have our silent flooders who are taking everything in, and they are just as boiling, but they don't say a word to you, right? It is so important on understanding who is what, and then creating tools for each of them, right? So a coworker of mine that's a silent flooder, I need to let them walk away. I need to give them their space. I need to tell them I am here for them when they're ready. I cannot expect an instant conversation with them, right? My external flooders, I'm like, you need to leave the office. And you need to go do your thing. You need to go for a walk. You need to go out, right? Like, we can't have this explosion in here, right? Because when people are flooding, okay, so flooded people, remember, the higher brain that knows consequences, good and bad, is offline. So we have our emotions sitting raw. Flooded people, the way the adrenaline hits the brain, they are not listening. They cannot respond to you. They have broken sentences, right? They can put profanity together like crazy, but they can't say, I need you to step out of my office and leave me alone, right? Broken sentences, their speech is harsh, it's broken up. And if you notice people that are very external flooders, they will bring up things from the past because their brain is so flooded, they actually have lost sight of what the actual problem is right now, okay? You also, when adrenaline hits the brain, you also lose small muscle movement ability. So I often ask, how many of us have tried to send a text message when we're angry? Right? Hands go up and I say, how well do your fingers work? Like, they don't, right? They don't, right? That is a direct sign, like, hey, you're flooding. You need to not send that text message, right? The other thing is the small movements in your eyes shut down. So road rage is very real. Like, I tell my youth, I said, you can't be driving if you're really angry because you literally have lost peripheral vision, right? And so it's these things that once people understand that, like, it's not 100% their fault that they're responding this way, we just got to get the adrenaline out of the brain, right? Because if you and I, Sinikka, mirror each other in an argument, we're gonna feed on each other's adrenaline and they're gonna go up. Right. So if I'm concerned about a deadline at work and you missed your deadline, and I say to you, I don't understand, the deadline was clear, and you say, well, I'm sorry, I had some things at home I need to take care of, and I come right back at you where I don't really care what's happening at home. You need to do this, and you come back and say, well, let me tell you, a supervisor should know what's going on in our home. Right now, both adrenalines are up, both people are offline, which means you're not listening, you can't respond. This is a no-win situation, right? Instead, we talk, you don't mirror the other person, right? So if someone's stepping at you, you step away from them, right? Pointing of the finger is the #1 way you can get someone to escalate, right? Nobody likes to be singled out, right? So we just don't point our fingers. We don't raise our voices. We don't touch people when they're asking, right? I was working with law enforcement in a different part of Iowa, and they had called me down to de-escalate something. And I went to de-escalate, and I pulled in a parking lot just in time to watch this youth turn around and kick the police officer, right? But what I saw was the police officer went to tell the youth, I just need you to calm down and touch their shoulder. Well, someone that's escalated, boom, she felt touched. And so she turned around really instantly, kicked him. So I get in there, I'm de-escalating her. And one way you can tell people are coming out of flooding is the apology starts, right? So I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to talk to you that way, or she looked at me, she goes, am I gonna have to go to jail? I said, well, you kicked a police officer. But it was really cool. Like 24 hours later, the police officer called me and he's like, I never should have touched her, should I? I was like, no, you shouldn't. And so he was able to own this a little bit, and we were able to work some things through her court. And so that's just priceless, right? Like we're all learning this together. And again, everybody's so different, but flooded people aren't listening. So stop the conversation, right? Stop the engagement, because it's not going to go well. It's not going to. Silent flooders, they need to walk away. They need to have their space. They need to recollect themselves. And we do things kind of on the home front. If they have a hoodie sweatshirt on and they pull it up over their hood, they get 40 minutes to themselves. Nobody can engage with them, right? After those 40 minutes, we need to engage. If somebody's escalated and angry, in my household, they don't get 3 hours, right? Like they can have their 40 minutes where nobody will engage them. But then after that time, we need to talk and we need to have some conversations. So the guidelines in the workplace are good that way too. You can't give them 5 minutes though. It's going to take a little bit longer than 5 minutes. Yes, to de-escalate. And then, your external flooders, they're going to be the ones that are louder and you see more physical symptoms. And so what do we do with them?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, let's get to number 3. So number 3 is the leadership posture. So what is leadership posture? How do I use that? And do I have to be a leader to use leadership posture?
No. So if I'm dealing with somebody that's escalated and I have my hand on my hip and my hips popped out and my head's tilted and I'm like, yep, right? They're instantly going to be like, you don't care. You don't care what I'm saying. Like, I'm just talking to nobody. So what we ask, just roll those shoulders back, right? You stand up straight, okay? You can go straight on or a little bit like off to the side of that person, but really like your shoulders, hips, nose, eyes should be looking at them, but we don't put our hands in our pocket, okay? Because especially the youth that I work with, a lot of people actually have some trauma with people grabbing things out of their pockets. And so we keep our hands out. Sometimes I just kind of grab my pant leg, to keep my hands a little busy, but you're just looking at the person and you're giving them the respect. And this leadership posture is very powerful. What you're telling them when they're yelling at you, the external flutter, you're telling them, I'm here, I'm engaged, I'm listening, but I'm not going to respond back and I'm not going to start talking back, right? So the more we hold this leadership posture, right, what we're saying is, I hear you, you're important to me, and I'm going to let you talk, okay? When I'm not talking back, I'm not adding to their flow. But I'm giving them the attention and the respect. And so that in itself will start to bring that adrenaline off the brain. So leadership posture is just one of the tools we use. It might not work, right? The first 2 times. I have a really hard client and I've used probably 15 different tools on this client, right? And one time I did the leadership posture and stood up and he kept yelling and screaming all the time. He's like, why are you standing like that? I said, because I just want you to know I'm engaged and I'm listening to everything you're saying. And he's like, oh, right? So other tools, leadership posture is among one of them. Or talk, what are our other tools? Okay, let's take workplace. Let's take the boardroom, right? And the boardrooms get a bit heated. People are escalated, but you can't leave, right? So you can take your forearms actually have receptors in them. So you could, if you're seated at a table, you could just put your arms underneath the table and just lightly push up on the table, right? just enough for your brain to be like, oh, my arms are working. That higher brain's going to come back on. Another good way, I've learned this through school board, is take notes. Like if you're in a meeting and it starts to get heated, take notes, because what you're doing is you are making your brain work. And the more our brain works, the more it's going to push that adrenaline out and get the higher brain back on. So if I know it's kind of a heated topic in the school, in the boardroom with the public coming in, I will take notes, write down who's speaking, what their topics are. And because, when I'm writing down, I have to write, I have to write their name, and my brain has to come up, what letters make the name Ryan, right? And how does my fingers make an R and a Y? I mean, very basic stuff, right? But it's forcing my brain. Sometimes we take for granted what our brain does, right? But it has to do all of that, right? And so it's actually really, really interesting that I was going back through all my notes, and there was one page I could not even read. Like I had no idea I was this flooded, and my writing was all shaken. Like I could hardly read. And it was a huge testament to me. I was like, oh, wow, I was really, really flooded this day, right? And so writing things down is always good. I will tell you, the typing helps a little bit. Writing, you just have, your hand can go and yep, you can, it uses more of a hand than just typing. So the other thing is I've worked with a lot of businesses where I'm like, so you can get mini Play-Dohs, and every workshop I do, I bring them. And my school board members will laugh. Mac Rankin always says, how's the Play-Doh, right? Again, I use it, I put it between, I don't push it on the table. I just use it between my two hands, and I just sit, right? I might use it in one hand while I'm writing, right? I might squeeze it in one hand while I'm writing. It's not distracting. It's under the table, but it's helping me stay online, right? I think it's also important to know that you have to know your triggers and your symptoms. So if this is a conversation that you knew was not going to go well in the boardroom, how do you prepare yourself ahead of time for that? And then how do you excuse yourself if you need to, and just say, is anyone up for a 10-minute recess break? Like, is there a way we can go get cold water? Very cold water will shock the brain. That's another one. Chewing is another tool. So when I go out to my at-risk or the homeless population, they know I have a pocket full of Tootsie Rolls or Laffy Taffy, Starburst, something to make, because I always joke, I'm like, it's really hard to argue when you're chewing, right? And so I give them all a piece, and they try to yell, and I was like, you're spitting everywhere, right? So like, I know we have a local business that now has Tootsie Rolls out all over, and they're like, Sue, it works. So chewing, if you have that 10 minutes, what is a song you can listen to, right? And so large muscle movements are really powerful in taking the adrenaline out. So, are there stairs in that place? Can you walk around the building for a little bit? Can you maybe do some toe raises while you're seated in that chair? So get your muscles moving. Get your muscles moving too to help. So, if you've got a client in your office and they're escalated, I always say, hey, I'm really thirsty. Would you like to walk with me to go get some water? Or would you like a snack or some coffee? I'll walk with you because I'm kind of hungry, right? Gets them up, gets us out, and gets us walking. So large muscle movements are perfect. Chewing, the singing. And I think one of kind of moving in to one of our other topics, I think the take-home points are understanding your symptoms and what your triggers are, right? So like I told my youth class that I taught, one of my triggers is side conversations. And my brain just can't do them. If I'm up here and I'm presenting and I've got somebody over here talking and someone over here talking, my brain is like in chaos. So I have learned like that's my trigger. And so I'll tell people I'm working with, like, hey, I just want you to know, one of my triggers of escalation is like, if you're doing something over here and you're asking me to do something over there. So how I work with it at work is if I'm sending a client a text message, or I need to send this email and a client comes busting through the door, or one of my staff, I will say, I'm going to need a minute just to finish this text message. or finish this email. Please go help yourself to anything and I will be right with you. Because I know my brain, I can't serve them and give them the respect they want when I'm trying to finish a text message and I'm trying to finish an email. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to me. So, right, like are there certain clients? Are there certain coworkers? Like, do they trigger you? Right? Is there a certain group of people that trigger you? And if they do, how do you prepare yourself for flooding? Do you have your Play-Doh? Do you have your cold water? Do you have something to chew on? Do you have an out if you need an out to go move your muscles for a little bit? So that stuff's really important. It's really important to understand other people's triggers.
Right. But let me get at the why of this, because I know you and I have talked about this before, because these are all wonderful things and they're great tactics and they're great techniques to get you through the moment. But I think there's more to this. And I think we've talked about it before, because why does any of this matter, Sue? Why do we need to understand our symptoms? Why go prepared for our triggers? Why de-escalate? Why does it matter?
Well, I think in the world today, we all run on very high emotion because a lot of it is expected of us. It's our kids, it's our workplace. Like somebody just joked the other day, full-time work is not 40 hours anymore. It's 45, maybe 50, right?
50,
and
yeah.
People that are working from home, I should just be expected to be on my computer all the time and be reached at whenever I want. Or when my supervisor comes in, nope, I should stop what I do and just instantly respond. And it's like, but it's so important to understand this, because how do you want to brand yourself? Like, do I want to brand myself as the hothead at meetings that can't get anything done because I'm offended, right? Do I want to brand myself as somebody that listens, sees where the need is, and tries to respond? Do I want to brand myself as a business owner that rules with a hard fist and you're either in or you're out? Or do you want to be known as a business owner that, hey, I get life happens, and how do we work through how life happens? I mean, I really am a firm believer that God did not make us to be angry, right? And yet that's what's happening. Like somebody reads one thing or they get an email or somebody complains about them and it's instantly escalation, right? And so it's so important how to conduct yourself, because how you conduct yourself is how you're viewed as a brand in the community, in the workforce, as a parent, right? And so I think the basis of C3, it is not about my client and how they respond. It's about me, right? It is about me managing my stress, my symptoms, my emotions, and handling conflict. I cannot change that other person. I can try by not stepping forward, not pointing my finger, not raising my voice. But we try so hard in this world to go look at self-help books and how not to be angry and how not to have anxiety. It's like, time out. It's time we have to look at the mirror, right? That's what was going on in my family. I was the external exploder, and it was damaging to my daughters and my husband. He was a silent flooder, and I did not respect the fact he would walk away. I wanted to solve it right then, right there. And so I had to change. Right? So in a world that is all so polarized, can you imagine our communities, if our community leaders, our elected officials, our business owners, our school districts, law enforcement, and all the other entities, if we all realized, hey, we're all going to manage our emotions in a way that respects everyone we deal with. And at the end of the day, we all can go home and be like, we are a community of integrity. And when we come to the boardroom, we get it done because what we know is we respect each other. The number one way to escalate someone besides pointing the finger is if that person feels disrespected. I mean, it's really hard. It's really hard to turn a conversation that starts with disrespect into a functional, productive conversation, right? And so I want to add just a little tidbit.
Please.
Really quick. I do really, in our training, I do really hone in on fatigue. Okay, fatigue. And these are the things that can escalate somebody almost instantly. We talked earlier about the heat. Dehydration can escalate somebody instantly. fatigue. And that's not like, it's those people that might sleep 14 hours and 4 hours and 6 hours and 12 hours, right? Fatigue in the tired way. Sugar and how sugar feeds like on the brain and the body. That can escalate somebody. We live in a world where we think we need a Starbucks when it gets crazy. Caffeine. That's what, look at our kids and these monster drinks, and we wonder why they're escalated. It's like, well, yeah, because their adrenal glands are going to blow up and their adrenaline is out of control, right? So we need to limit our caffeine on days that we know are going to be a little emotionally hard. We need to respect, if we know a coworker or a family member is going through a divorce, a death in the family, tragedies hit, we cannot expect them to function and produce results like they normally would.
Right.
So like to create better communities and better workplaces, we just have to have plans in place to deal with all of this stuff, right? Like death happens. It happens, but how do we give that person space to say, hey, I just need you to accomplish these 3 things today. Maybe their list is normally 10, but their adrenal, they don't have the capacity. Don't fire them.
Right.
Be realistic with them and say, hey, do these 3 tasks look like they're manageable today?
Yep.
Have a conversation, right?
Yeah.
Here's the last thing I'm going to end on is I talk often with my pastors, and I said, it breaks my heart in this world because people that are compassionate or listening and not always respond are looked as being weak, right? And I was like, that whole component of gentleness, running in gentleness. And Pastor Ben said to me, do you know that the actual root of the word gentleness is power with control? And I was like, can you imagine if we have a world with all of our leaders and all of our business owners that are like, okay, how do we gently press through this situation for the bigger picture?
The bigger picture. No, I love that. I love that. Oh, Sue, thank you so very much. So to our listeners, if you are just now you wrap it in and you're like, whoa, I missed something, you got to go back, because we were spending time with Sue Wilson here learning about the 5 components of C3 De-Escalations. And she talked us through explaining the brain and the different ways people respond and the leadership posture, and then a bunch of other tools to use if you're in a highly emotionally charged conversation, tools that you can use to help yourself manage, and really then getting to understanding your own symptoms and triggers and making a plan so you can manage your integrity. Sue, this has just been so amazing. Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Well, thank you so much for asking. This is just a huge passion of mine. And it's just been awesome. It's been a great morning. Even though it's terribly rainy outside, it's been a fabulous Friday morning with you. So thank you. Thank you so much for reaching out.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. And this would not be the Even Better podcast if I didn't ask my trademark question. What is making you even better these days?
Oh, complete transparency is looking at my schedule and making sure I'm ready to go and I have myself in the right mindset before I start my day. If I know I have a tough client on the calendar, I park further away. So I work my muscles. I have my tools ready to go. And it's just how you conduct yourself. And so the girls will say at home, well, mom, like a lot of things have changed in this house. And so just we're working on ourselves in a way that will better our communities. And so that's what I do. And there's days I screw up, and there's days there's days I owe apologies to a lot of people, but every day is a new day. And so you come back with just understanding people don't choose to be angry. It's how we choose to respond to them.
And there it is. There's yet another example of why you are such a treasure in our community, Sue. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
You bet. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining. On behalf of all of us here at Your Career Next Step, we hope the rest of your day is even better. Start your journey on becoming a certified changemaker through our Changemakers program. You'll get 8 full-day virtual sessions over 10 months, plus 6 hours of one-on-one coaching, 8 hours of intentional networking, and 8 hours of personal reflection.